few months ago, a volume of research was published on this subject, containing articles by researchers from Heidelberg and from abroad. Along with the central role of the Masorah as a tool for fixing the biblical text and preserving it from errors and controversy, the Masorah comments have been used throughout the ages to decorate the Bible codices. This is already true in the oldest manuscript known to us. In the well-known Leningrad Codex, we find colorful carpet pages, the work of Shmuel ben Yaakov. And such pages appear also in manuscript LM, which was also written by the same Masoret, Shmuel ben Yaakov. The Aleppo Codex has also extra pages at the beginning and end of gold painting, as Professor Moshe David Kasuto testified. But unfortunately, these pages were lost about 75 years ago. The cumulative Masorah, found in the emergence of many biblical manuscripts, also creates wonderful aesthetic structures. And here we see one example from the Cairo Codex, which have many of these sort of cumulative Masorah. And in Ashkenazi manuscripts from the 13th and 14th century, we find micrographic drawing of the Masorah Magna, such as the opening page of the book of Ezekiel in manuscript London, Oriental 2091, that appears on the cover of the book of articles that I mentioned before. Various scholars of the Masorah over the generation argue that there is some contrast or even contradiction between the main goal of the Masorah as an effective tool for clarifying the version of the Bible and the aesthetic use of the Masorah comments. Eliyahu Bachur, Ashkenaz Levita, wrote in the 16th century that הסופרים הזידו ועל המסורת לא הקפידו, רק עיקר חשיבותם לייפות את כתיבתם בתמונות וציורים, בסכסוכים ובקישורים ובציצים ופרחים, ועל כן הם מוכרחים לפעמים לקצר ולפעמים לבצר. He blames the scribes that they did not care for the Masorah and include in their manuscripts with illuminations of various kinds of buds, flowers, etc. Hence, they were obligated sometimes to shorten and sometimes to expand the Masorah. However, research done here in Heidelberg attempts to reveal the other side of the coin and to see the integration between the two uses of the Masorah. It's possible to find cases where the verbal content of the verses of the Masorah in the micrographic ornaments are integrated into the aesthetic context that drawing come to express. In an article by Hannah Liss in this book that I mentioned, she analyzes two paintings of the four animals of the Merkava in the opening of the book of Ezekiel and shows many associative affinities that can be found between the verses of the Masorah comments and the contents of these drawings. I would like to point out one word in this micrographic drawing of the ox here. Of the Merkava, which may open a big window for us to see and understand the work of the artist who did this complex work. So this ox is made of this of the words of this verse. וירקעו את פחי הזהב וקיצץ פתילים. It's from Exodus 39. לעשות בתוך התכלת ובתוך הארגמן ובתוך תולעת השני ובתוך השש. Now let's see how it works. וירקעו את פחי הזהב וקיצץ פתילים. לעשות בתוך התכלת ובתוך הארגמן ובתוך תולעת השני, and again ובתוך תולעת השני ובתוך השש. So we see here all the legs of the ox are written by this verse from the book of Exodus. And now we see another word here. Within the verse, we find the word regel, a foot. Where did this word come from? I think that it was accidentally copied here from the instruction sheet that was in front of the artist. Its intention in the original was to instruct the writer where to write the words of the verse at the foot of the ox. So it was written there, regel ubtoch tolat hashani, and the artist, by mistake, copied this instruction word into his drawing. If so, we learn that two people were involved in the preparing of this micrographic Masorah. One was the Masoret expert, who chose the verses and wrote them down in the preparation sketch, accompanied by guidelines, lines, where to place each verse. And the second was a calligraphic artist who actually performed the work of writing. It's difficult to decide which of them thought about the idea of this whole drawing and planned the content of this drawing and who prepared this sketch of the painting. Maybe it was a joint work, and maybe the Masoret thought about the context and the artist created the sketch of the painting without the verses, but only draw the drawing itself. And then came the Masoret again and wrote down the words of the Masorah that should be written in each part of the drawing. And finally, the artist came again and performed the craft according to the sketch. If you accept my explanation, let's go on with this assumption. The two artists were both Jews, since the correspondence between them was conducted in Hebrew. And this proved that the complex work of preparing this drawing was not done by chance, but as the writing progressed, but was carefully planned in advance. This hypothesis can also explain additional fact, and I mean the mistakes that we find here in the other place in copying the verses. For example, here we have the phrase "Ubtoch tolat hashani," and then in one leg, and then again in the other leg, "Ubtoch tolat hashani." It may be that the instruction was written only once, and the Masoret did it twice by mistake. As mentioned, one word that was accidentally copied teaches us a lot about the way of working, and in this direction, one can continue to search and perhaps find more such examples, and I guess that more will be found in the future, and such understand better how the Masorah was created. And now we will move from the aesthetic role of the Masorah to the interpretation of the Bible in the Masorah comments. The purpose of the Masorah is to preserve the text of Scripture by establishing a uniform text, accurate in spelling, pronunciation, and cantillation signs, the Masoretes created the basis for the study of scripture and its interpretation. Does the Masorah engage in exegesis? Did the Masoretes regard interpreting scripture as part of their task? Is biblical exegesis reflected in Masoretic notes? We shall try to answer these questions in this lecture. To answer this question, it's appropriate to refer to 7 points or 7 types of Masorah comments. Here they are in front of you. In my lecture today, however, I will mainly address the first 3 types, which are counting of homonyms without and with, indicating their meanings. That's the first 2, and then using the meaning distinction as an aid in describing the biblical text. And the other 4 I will address in short at the end. And there are the sort of Trei Lishanei and Tikunei Sofrim, Sevirin, and homiletic exegesis of the Masorah. So let's begin with the first sort. A general rule of the Masorah is that it follows the pronunciation of the words. The Masorah combines homonyms even if they are not written identically or even if they have different meanings. Let's begin with that example, which refer to grammatical homonyms. The word me'itach, from you or of you, occurs 5 times in the Bible. The Masorah Magna of the Aleppo Codex counts these 5 instances here and give simanim for these 5 instances. 2 of them appear here in the beginning of the first book of Kings. Adonijah is Solomon's oldest brother who tried to reign but failed, and then he wanted to make a request for Solomon. He turns to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and says, "Ve'ata she'ela achat anochi sho'el me'itach." I have one request to make to you. Now, Adonijah refers to Bathsheba. So the word me'itach refers to feminine. But then Bathsheba goes to Shlomo and they repeated the same sentence. And she says, Batomer, she'ela achat ktana anochi sho'elet me'itach. Now she refers to Solomon, masculine form. And so the form me'itach appears here twice, and the Masorah referred to these 2 verses by the word she'ela, she'ela, without any distinguish between the grammatical forms. Much more complicated is that example who was brought by Professor Aaron Dotan. Here we see a Masorah which counts 6 occurrences of the verb nisa. And the Masorah said that nisa occurs 6 times, bet, ktiv, samach, hey. 2 of them are written with the letters samach and hey, and 4 are written with shin aleph. So the Masorah refers only to the spelling. But if we go through these 6 verses, we can see that we have here many verbs, not only from 2 roots, nasa, nun samach yud, and nun sin aleph, but also from some binyanim, pi'el, nif'al, and even kal, from some tenses, past, present, and future, and from some persons, the 3rd person, one is the 1st person. For example, nisa levavenu el kapayim means let us lift our hearts with our hands, and it's a future form of 1st person plural. Now, says Professor Dotan, נקבצו באו כאן 6 תיבות שונות מ5 קטגוריות צורניות. The Masoret ignored the grammatical differences and saw all 6 forms as one homophonic essence. Would not this be the practice of a modern linguist who would record the phonetic structure and take it as a starting point, and only then would he analyze the expression morphologically? It is not, of course, modern linguistics, but inclusive structuralist approach to language already in ancient time is surprising and interesting. Let's now see some homonyms that have entirely different meanings. And some of them were brought by my teacher, Professor Arab Mordechai Breuer, and they refer to the word milel, the first one, and then to the verb refatim. Let's see the first one, milel. Breuer says, this Masorah comments, נראית כמו בדיחה, looks like a joke. It states that the word milel occurs twice in the Bible. However, if we look at the concordance, we find just one occurrence of the verb, mi milel le'Avraham. There is also a second place, but the concordance will not bring it under the letter mem, but under the letter lamed, because the second verse is shomer ma milayla, shomer ma milel. So these two sentences, milayla is equal to milel, and it means what of the night. The lack of understanding, in brackets, of the Masorah borders here with genius. It combines two words that are similar in their pronunciation, but ignore the fact that they differ in their meaning and in their grammatical root. It's doubtful if there is another nation that has created such a concordance. And then Rabbi Breuer suggested an explanation for that combination. And he says, and he tried to explain why the Masorah ignore the meaning. He brings a midrash from Talmud Yerushalmi that referred to this verse in Isaiah and explained it in another word. The people of Israel asked Isaiah, מה מלילה? מה יוצא לנו מתוך הלילה הזה? Of the Galut. And then the answer was, המתינו לי עד שנשאל. Wait until I'll ask. כיוון ששאל, Isaiah went and asked in heaven, and then he came back. And then Israel, the people of Israel told him, shomer ma milel shomer ha'olamim. What had said what God said. So here in this midrash, they interpreted the word milel as a verb. What did he say? And therefore, said Rabbi Breuer, the Masorah didn't count the word according to their meanings, but only according to their pronunciation. Doing so, the Masorah is walking on safe ground, for the fact is certain. This fact is certain. The word milel appears twice in the Bible, whatever it means. So the Masorah ignores the difference in meaning and refers only to the pronunciation. And the second example that Breuer gives refer to the verb urfatim, and I will heal them. This verb appears in Jeremiah and then in the book of Hosea, ולא ידעו כי רפתים, and the Masorah said that there is also a third place, גזר ממכלה צאן ואין בקר ברפתים. No cattle are in the cowsheds. The ability of the Masorah to combine words only according to their sounds, ignoring their meanings, reach a climax here that can arouse admiration. That's the examples that Breuer brings, and there are many others such examples. And now let's turn to the second kind, which is similar to this kind. The Masorah counts together words with some meanings, but the Masorah refers to the difference in the meanings. And let's have one example, vehevel. The word vehevel occurs 3 times in the Bible, and we can find this Masorah in many, many places. Here I brought one, a Masorah Magna comment from the Aleppo Codex, 2 from Leningrad Codex, and 1 from Cairo Codex. And all of them counts 3 occurrences of vehevel, 1 in Genesis, 1 in Isaiah, and 1 in Proverbs. Now, the Masorah of the Aleppo Codex, adding at the end of the comment, Kadmei Shemenash. The first one is a proper name of a man. And it's the same you can see here at the Leningrad Codex, Chad Shemenash, one of them is a proper name. And the Masorah of the Cairo Codex says Bet Behevel Gimel, 3 occurrences of Behevel. 2 of them are Leshon Havila, it's in the meaning of Hevel, of Bain. Ve'echad Shem Barnash, and 1 of them is a proper name. But we have another comment in the Leningrad Codex, which count these 3 occurrences, ignoring the difference in meaning. So in the same case, sometimes we find that the Masorah refer at the end or in the beginning to the different meanings, and sometimes the same Masorah comments may come in other manuscripts without referring to the different meanings. How many times the Masorah refer? What is the relation between these 2 sorts? Where the Masorah relate or does not relate to the difference in the meaning. Before saying that, I have some reference to a concordance, which is, of course, different from the Masorah in that respect. Heidelberg says that in one of the first concordance of the Hebrew Bible, that of Buxtorf, he brought together with the 2 verses of Hevel from Isaiah and from Proverbs, he brought also the 3rd verse, Hevel Levi Gamru. ועל זה רשם אחד המתלוצצים, one of the comedian wrote in the version of this concordance, Hevel Levi Gamru. The concordance writer also wrote in vain, Hevel Levi Gamru, that this verse is not in its place, because that's a difference of a Prof, of a concordance, and the Masorah. The Masorah ignores the meanings and brings everything together, but the concordance is supposed to divide all occurrences according to the meaning and according to their grammatical form. And now, these 2 scholars say about what they say about the cases, how many cases in Masorah refer to the meaning. Prof wrote that usually the Masorah does not indicate the differences in meaning between the word quoted. And then came Raphael Zer in his doctoral thesis in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and he says, no, usually in most of the cases, the Masorah does indicate the differences of meaning. And he says in his work that he quotes Boyer's, what Boyer said about that, and said, אני באתי לחלוק על זה, בדרך כלל תעמוד המסורה על הבדלי המשמעית. To prove that, he had a sample of about 60 chapters of Bible, 20 from the Pentateuch, 20 from the Prophet, and 20 chapters from Chronicles and the Ketuvim. And then he looked all over and looked for the words that are homonyms. He found 95 homonyms in these chapters, and when he checked a lot of manuscripts and looked for Masorah comments that refer to these homophone words, he found out that in 64 out of 95 of these words, that means 2/3 of the cases, the Masorah wrote, added a comment that there are some different meanings, and only a third of the cases, the Masorah ignored the difference. But I think that this sample is really convenient, but the way of counting of there was like that. If we found many comments of the same topic in many manuscripts, like this example, he said, so the Masorah indicates the difference in meanings as to the word heaven, and he count this word as one of the words that the Masorah differ in the meaning. But we can count it differently and say, no, even so, we have here 4 comments, only 3 of them differ. And if we count every Masorah comment, so the result will be lower than that of Rafael Zer. Okay. Now let's go to the third kind of our discussion, and that is not like the 2 first kinds, when the Masorah counts all together all occurrences of one word. Sometimes the Masorah limited itself to only one meaning and excluding all the verses that refer to the other meaning. Let's begin with the example of Yosef. Okay, do you see the software? I'm going to find out how many times in the Bible we have the word Yosef or Yosef. So, sorry. Okay, take 1 minute. Okay, so you can find out that the word Yosef or Yosef, not Yosef, and only Yosef, because I wrote here Yosef with Shva, it occurs 13 times. Yosef הורד מצרימה, Yosef ben 30 שנה, Yosef, etc. And we go on, and here we find out ויאמר, in Samuel 2, ויאמר יואב אל המלך, ויוסף אדוני אלוהיך אל העם כהם וכהם 100 פעמים. Shall God add on the people more and more. And then another occurrences of Bnei Yaakov Yosef, of the proper name. And then in Proverbs, ישמע חכם ויוסף לקח. תן לחכם ויחכם עוד, הודה לצדיק ויוסף לקח. And another one, ברוב חוכמה רוב כעס, ויוסיף דעת יוסיף מכאוב. So we have here some different forms of the verb to add, ויוסיף, ויוסף, ויוסף. So the Masorah here says, the Masorah Magna of the Aleppo Codex, ויוסף, Gimel Leshon Tosefet. So why did the Masorah add Leshon Tosefet? Masorah tells us, ignore all occurrences of the proper name. They are not interesting. They are all Yosef, and there's nothing to say about the proper name. If you only focus on these occurrences of Leshon Tosefet, that means to add Yosef, you have three occurrences, 3 verses, Bet Mil'el v'chad Milra. Vayomer Yoav, that's this verse from Samuel. Vayomer Yoav is Yosef, is Milra. and Yishma Chacham, Ten LaChacham, both of these verses of Proverbs are Mil'el, the Yosef. So the Masorah does not mention this verse, the Yosef, because the Masorah counts only the Yosef. There's the Masorah sees the Yosef as two forms of the same pronunciation. With only a tiny difference of the stressed syllable. So the Masorah counts them together, and they are all separated from the one, not the Yosef, but the Yosef. So here the focusing in one meaning, it serves the Masorah. The Masorah uses the meaning of the verse. Now let's take there are two forms, Lavi and Lehavi. One equals 13 times, and the second equals 13 times, 134 times. If we look from them together, we'll have ורבקה שומעת מדבר יצחק אל עשיו בנו, וילך עשיו השדה, לצוד ציד להביא. And the second one, קרא רבץ כאריה וכלביא מי יקימנו. But there's no connection with להביא to bring and להביא a lion. But if we go on, you will find this verse. ואת עיני צדקיהו עיוור, ויעשרהו בנחושתיים להביא אותו בבלה. צדקיהו was brought to Babylon. להביא אותו בבלה. This להביא means to bring. And also another verse in Chronicles, מהחל התרומה להביא בית השם. So the task of the Masorah is to divide when do we have Lavi and when do we have Lehavi. And they are combined together because the meaning of to bring is sometimes, most of the times, is Lehavi, but in two exception forms, the form Lehavi is shortens and becomes Lavi. So the Masorah have to count them and to keep these special forms. So the Masorah of the Aleppo Codex says, Lavi bet. There are two verses that are Lavi. These two verses, ואת עיני צדקיהו עיוור, and מאחל התרומה, וכל לשון ארי דכבתון. Not only these, everywhere when the same word Lavi comes and means a lion, it's also Lavi. It will never be Lehavi as a lion. So let's try to understand what's going here from the point of view of the Masorah. The Masorah wanted to distinguish between Lavi, 13 occurrences, and Lehavi. It could count all 13 occurrences of Lavi, and by that distinguish between the two forms. But the Masorah is going in another way. The Masorah uses the meaning and says we have to distinguish between the meaning of a lion and the meaning of to bring. And now everyone that is not here sitting here, but at home is invited to try to write on the screen. You can do it by annotate and try to fill the numbers according to the Masorah. Here, you can write a number or a phrase like all occurrences, none of the occurrences, or the rest of the occurrences. So I'm waiting for all the parts. We'll be the first to fill this by annotate here. So my audience here also invited to say where we will put the number 2 that the Masorah indicates. So what do you think? Where the number 2, where it comes in these 4 spots?
I think that too.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Next one. Okay. Thank you. So put it again. Okay. Why did you erase it? 2 times here. Okay.
Die Leute schreiben jeder, der was schreibt, überschreibt es vom nächsten, oder?
Okay, that's right. 2 times the V in the meaning to bring, and now you are not allowed to write it if it's 11. You cannot write any numbers that are not quoted by the Masorah. So that's right that there are 11 such cases, because I told you there are 13. But what you can know from the Masorah, that 2 are Lavi, and all the rest are Lehavi. And if we go to the second meaning of a lion, so no one of them is Lehavi, all of them will be Lavi. So I'll now erase your drawing and put mine. So the Masorah says Lavi bet. The Masorah doesn't define this meaning to bring, but she defines the other meaning, a lion. Lion, all the places that we have Lavi or Lehavi as a lion, it's always Lavi. None of them is Lehavi. And in the other meaning, which is to bring, which Masorah doesn't say explicitly, 2 are Lavi, all the rest are Lehavi. And now let's go to the last example, which is more complicated. Here it is. Ulecha. ד' כתיב ה' בסוף התיבה, בסימן הון, וכל לשון הליכה כתב ה' בר מין ג'. So let's say that this text of the Masorah is very, very complicated, because there are many occurrences of the word lecha, or it can also be with vav, the conjunctive vav, ulecha. So we have more than 500 occurrences in the Bible. And here it's complicated because we have 2 meanings, but none of them has a unique, both spellings serve in both meanings. Let's see. So try to fill now the table, those who are home. Let's say that we are going to find when do we have lecha written with 2 letters, lamed and chaf, and without the final hey, and where we have the same pronunciation, lecha, written with a final hey. So now, how does the Masorah divide all the occurrences in order not to have to count all the 33 cases? Of course, the Masorah is not going to count 495 cases, it's too much. It's enough to count 33, but the Masorah wanted to count less than this number, and it will be done by defining 2 separate meanings. So what are the meanings of the word? Let's go one step ahead. One meaning is go. The imperative form, the long imperative form, lecha, like lecha dodi, go. That's one meaning. the second one, and that's what Masorah called Leshon Halicha. The second one is not defined by the Masorah, but it's the preposition to you. Masculine, singular, lecha, to you. And now, as I said before, none of these meanings have uniform spelling. Both of them have the two ways of spelling. But even though the Masorah uses the difference in meaning in order to shorten its description. Now I'm waiting again for the numbers that will come from abroad. Here, how many times each meaning comes? Okay, I have time. We have here ולך ד' כתיב ה' בסוף התיבה. So we expect to find the number 4, and then בכל לשון הליכה כתב ה' בר מין ג', except of 3. So the two numbers that should appear here is 4 and 3. And if you don't do it, I'll do it myself. 3 occurrences of go, and let's begin here. ד' כתיב ה' בסוף התיבה. Let's begin from the end. כל לשון הליכה כתב ה', that's the first line. לשון הליכה, in the meaning of go, most of the cases are written plainer with a at the end, except of 3 cases. And these are the 3 cases. And all the other means the other meaning, there are 4 who are written with a, and all the rest are written without the a. So the Masorah, instead of counting 33 verses, it should count only 7 cases, because everyone that goes and looked at the verse sees immediately what the meaning is. It's not a difficult test to understand if the meaning is go or to you. And then when you follow the meaning, you can determine in every verse in the Bible what's the spelling is, but you have to use this table or this Masorah, because the meaning, knowing the meaning for itself is not enough. There are some exceptions, which the meaning is go, and even though they are written without hey, and some the opposite exception, the meaning is to you, but it's written with hey, like here, lecha en Masorah motzet, to you, you have no Masorah. Okay, now one verse has some special importance, and that this verse of Psalms 80, Ulecha lishuat alanu. So that's a verse. לפני אפרים ובנימין ומנשה עוררה את גבורתך. The poet refers to God, and he wants him to appear, to show his power to the tribes of Israel. ולך lishuat alanu. Go and help us. לך lishuat alanu. So when Rashi goes and wanted to explain this verse, he says, Lecha lishuat alanu, en ze leshon halicha. The meaning of this ulecha is not go, ela kmo ulecha. And here, to explain, I think that Rashi wrote the PowerPoint, so if not, it's not understandable. וכן הוא במסורת, אם הוא לך אפוד יעקב, ולך עם בשורה מוצאת, סמלה לך קצין תהיה לנו. So Rashi refers to the Masorah comments, which is equal to our Masorah, and says, the Masorah combined all these 4 verses, and says that all these verses, which means to you, the spelling is with hey. So the Masorah point out this verse and defined its meaning. It's not Lashon Halicha, but another meaning, which is to you. So Rashi sees himself, he learned from the Masorah how the Masoret interpret this verse, and Rashi also thinks that if the Masorah determine this interpretation, it's obligated. So Rashi also wanted to follow the Masorah. If we go to other commentators, we see that they also are aware of this Masorah, but their relation is different. Ibn Ezra says, Ulecha kmo lech. Lecha means go. Amru ba'alei ha'masoret ki hu maleh. The Masoret says that it's written with an exceptional hey. והטעם הוא לך ועליך הדבר להושיענו. It's upon you, it's up to you to solve us. ולך לישועת לנו. That what the Masoret said. וזה הפירוש, איננו ישר בעיניי. So Ibn Ezra said, okay, that's what the Masoret said, but I don't get it. I think that according to the Prat, it's better to explain ולך, go and solve us. And similar is also רבי מנחם מאירי עם פרובנס, ולך לישועתה לנו, רוצה לומר, תלך בזריזות לפנינו, להושיענו, go rapidly in front of us and solve us, ויש מפרשים ולך כמו לך, כדרך ולך איפה, ואף בעל המסורה ראיתי שכלל את כולם. There is another way to interpret this version, and also the Masoret goes in that way, but he himself does not see himself obligated to what the Masorah says. And also Radak, without mentioning the Masorah, says, Telech lefanenu lehoshiem. So we see here that the Masorah gives us the meaning of this verse, and some of the Rashi follow the Masorah, and says, if the Masorah says so, I also have to follow the Masorah. And other commentators in Spain or Provence, they know the Masorah and they say, okay, that's what the Masoret said, but we think that the other interpretation is better. And now I want to add one point, and I'm not sure about that, but maybe that the Masoret here didn't really wanted to determine the meaning of this verse. And I would have think in such a way. If this verse can be interpreted in two different ways. All other 500 verses are very, very simple, and they have only one simple meaning. But that one can be interpreted in both ways. If the Masoret, if you explain that Ulecha is go, so the Masoret should have ignored this verse and say only three are written here with hey, the meaning to you, and three are in the opposite. But if I had done so, some other people will maybe that will say that Ulecha here means to you, and then they will write the word without hey. So the best choice of the Masoret is to put this verse here and present it explicitly, not because he is sure that that is the meaning of this verse, but because it's the best way how to ensure that it will be written with hey as should be done, because the other way will remain it uncertain how to write this verse. So I thought about this possibility. I'm not sure about it, but maybe. Okay, let's conclude. The main goal of the Masorah was not exegesis, but maintaining the text of the scripture. Occasionally, the Masorah refers to the biblical interpretation using distinctions of meaning in order to determine the text and do it efficiently. Sometimes the Masorah comments on different meaning of words that are counted together. In my opinion, this comes to prevent a mistake or omission of verses or puzzlement of the audience on the combination of two different meanings. I'll go back and remind what I said about Breuer and Dotan. Dotan said that this approach of the Masorah is surprising and interesting. But Breuer said that it looks like a joke, but and maybe the Masorah seems like a lack of understanding. So the Masorah wanted to avoid this impression of lack of understanding, and therefore the Masorah says, okay, I count 5 or 6 verses. I know that they are of two separate meanings. So by saying that, the Masorah doesn't want to interrupt the verses, because most of the cases, there is no doubt about the interpretation of the verses. The Masorah only wants to take out, to avoid the surprise of the audience, and that's why the Masorah, in some of the cases, indicates the different meanings. However, the exegetical potential of the Masoretic notes is very rich. Just a minute. Let's see what we made. Okay, and divided into a variety of types. Early exegesis, like Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, Radak, and others, made use of the Masorah as an aid to their exegesis. To examine Masoretic notes and derive from them carefully conclusions regarding the meaning of the verses is an important challenge. Other types of Masorah comments relating to the meaning of the words, which I didn't deal with here, are discussed in my book of the Masorah that was published in English in 2019, and the Hebrew edition will appear in the coming weeks. The combination of Masorah and biblical interpretation, as well as the combination of Masorah and artistic design, are a source of broad and interesting intellectual wealth, a great treasure of wisdom that awaits research, discovery, and expression. Thank you.